in our usual meeting place on Block 1, Floor 2, County Hall. Welcome. I'd like to welcome you all. And the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Chair, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Bridget.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else. Minutes of the previous meetings on the 12th of January and the 2nd of February. You agree I signed them? Excellent, thank you. Declarations of members' interest. If it's registered, you don't need to mention it again, but I don't see any hands up. So, Brian?
Chair, can I just go back the minutes? I just want to make it official that I want to thank the officers that I met up with on both of those scrutinies, just for an update and more information. They went above and beyond. I don't want to name them, but the officers know who they are, and I just want to say thank you to them. Excellent.
Thanks for that, Brian. Much appreciated, I'm sure. So we're now at the forward plan of cabinet decisions. Sean, do you just want to talk us through this?
Yeah, there's a couple that have previously been reported to you, so I won't go over those again. But there's a new item, the development of Potland Burn biodiversity net gain site, which is on page 21, I think. Just to confirm that will be coming to this committee, but it will be post-scrutiny. It will be looking at the implementation of the proposals. And I think we're coming back in April to this group.
Excellent. Are we all happy with that? Yeah, looks as though nobody wants to say anything about that. Excellent. So, and now I'm going to shuffle the agenda around a bit, and we're going to do the library strategy first, and then we're going to do the climate change, because I think it's probably the climate change update is going to take longer than the library strategy. So that's what we're doing. So first of all, it's going to be Nigel, and we have a guest on screen who is going to be her usual brilliant self when the time comes. Nigel.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for the opportunity to attend today. Just for clarity, my name is Nigel Walsh. I'm the Interim Service Director, and I'm joined today online by Alison Peden, who is a Library Service Manager. Unfortunately, Alison has contracted COVID for the second time, so been particularly unlucky. The committee chair has previously received an update of the findings of the consultation we did into the library service from 2019 to 2020. That was indeed the largest public consultation we'd done to establish the real priorities from our residents and also our staff for the library service. Just for context, local authorities have a statutory duty under the Public Libraries and Museums Act 1964 to provide a comprehensive and efficient library service for all persons. Therefore, it's essential you have a good evidence base from which to prioritise your services. Libraries are now recognised as vital community hubs by the DCMS, and this was highlighted in their Ambition for Public Libraries report. The DCMS highlighted that libraries contribute to 7 critical outcomes for both individuals and communities, those being culture and creative enrichment, increased reading and literacy, helping everyone achieve their full potential, healthy and happier lives, improved digital access and literacy, greater prosperity and stronger, more resilient communities. There's also an Arts Council sector support organisation called Libraries Connected. They have developed a framework of 4 universal offers that indeed form the core of the public library offer in terms of driving innovation and development and improvement. And these 4 universal offers are key to Northumberland County Council's approach in taking our library service forward. Those universal offers are reading, digital and information, health and well-being, and culture and creativity. Okay. So in terms of progress on service development, just as a recap, the consultation took place from late 2019 into 2020. It just encroached into the onset of the pandemic. We had over 4,000 respondents. We took the opinions of residents, staff and stakeholders. So indeed, we do feel we've got a very clear, evident and agreed base of which to build the service forward. Based on those findings, we developed a service strategy for service redevelopment based on Phase A, strengthening the core service, Phase B, establishing library hubs in each locality area, and C, extending reach and partnerships. The consultation reported it was evident that the library service was achieving well across all areas, which is very positive. However, there was room for improvement, which we've certainly focused on those areas. Just to give you a snapshot of the scope of the library service in Northumberland, the latest performance data we have from Q3, which will have been October till December 2021, reported that we in fact 2,231 new library members, 96,311 physical book issues, 26,000 mylibrary.co.uk sessions, 32,000, almost 33,000 press reader sessions, over 4,000 hours of public PC usage, 11,000 ebook downloads and 11,086 e-audio downloads, supported by 230 in-person events, attended by almost 2,500 people, and that's in the space of 3 months. So I think in terms of that reach, they're certainly making good progress. Before I hand over to Alison, who can talk through a little bit more detail, just wanted to talk through some of the key measures, some of the key improvements we've put in place. So for Phase A, in strengthening the core service, we're focused on digital, we're focused on staffing and resources, and also we're focused on marketing for that. In terms of digital, we've introduced a new platform for ebooks and e-audio, much more user-friendly, and that's called BorrowBox. We've introduced Press Reader. We're making 6,000 magazines available from over 100, available, and newspapers from over 100 countries. In terms of digital, we also obviously, as demand shifted during the pandemic, we also moved. We quite swift of foot. We moved a number of the established groups online, such as the Storytime, craft sessions, family history groups, and even a summer reading challenge we took online. So in terms of digital, we've vastly improved that offer. We've also set up alongside that a digital helpline available for library customers to actually help them engage with our services, but also to help them engage with access to general information through devices that people have at home. In terms of staffing, we've introduced a supervisor role in each of the locality areas. We've created an additional library post. We've created additional digital resource assistant, and really encouragingly, we've now have 4 apprentices in place, and we're looking to actively seeking 4 more. We're currently working our way through filling the vacancies, and we're now in the last phase to fill every library assistant vacancy. So in terms of staffing, we're going to be up to full contingent very soon. In terms of resources, to support the service redesign, I'd like to say the members supported funding to assist with the transformation programme of 100k, which has been very well deployed. We've also worked closely with public health to secure additional COVID outbreak management funding to really assist residents as they now begin to re-engage with council services and re-engage in the communities and in their local areas. Just in terms of a snapshot of I think how successful the digital programme has become, the demand for digital titles is now up by 186%, and visits to the library website are now up to 25,000 per month on average, as opposed to previously 9,000. So we've seen some dramatic increases there, Chair. In terms of digital access as well, we've also introduced new self-service kiosks in 12 branches, and we've invested in a further 2, and that will enable such things as Wi-Fi printing. I mean, during the pandemic, new ways of engagement were absolutely necessary, and we're now looking to incorporate a hybrid model going forward, where we take the learning from the pandemic period, such as select and collect, befriending calls, which has now evolved into reading friends. We're looking to carry that forward into new ways of working. So when we look at the digital helpline, we look at the enhanced digital resources, the online event programme, I think we've got a good holistic approach to bringing people online and getting the most out of the service. The consultation also highlighted the need for more general awareness around the Northumberland's library service. So we're doing a significant amount of work to increase that basic awareness through a professional marketing campaign, and also looking at the very practical level, increasing the street level signage to local libraries. It is something that came out of the survey as well. We've also introduced a new monthly newsletter, which is, we've got 3,000 new members signed up to that now. And there's a link to that in the report, and that highlights the breadth of activity. Phase B was the establishment of the library hubs. So as England's largest and most sparsely populated county, it is quite simply logistically impossible to provide the same scope of service across 30 libraries. So we took the decision to establish hub libraries in Berwick, Blythe, Cramlington, Hexham and Morpeth, which equate to the locality areas. And in the report, there's a broad criteria for selection that members can review. That doesn't in any way reduce the significance of the smaller or town libraries. It's just that establishing those hub libraries allows us to then curate a specific offer across each of the locality areas based across culture, reading, digital and health, appropriate to the needs of each of those areas. So that's working through well. So those are established. That's good progress. The third phase is, I would say we're in now, is very much about extending reach and partnerships. This is really about exploring new partnerships, both within the council and externally. And that is about new collaborations to increase reach, increase impact, and increase our ability to assist people's quality of life. We're carrying out significant work with Communities Together, NCT, particularly those of you, I hope you've had a chance to visit the Cramlington Hub, which we're particularly pleased with. Also, developments of that genre taking place in Newbiggin and Holtwhistle, they're under development. Working with communities, very keen to extend the local reach and local impact and local relevance of the smaller libraries by partnering as much as possible with local community groups. And in particular, we're looking at reassessing the role of volunteers and how can they help complement the library service, but also how can that volunteering role assist communities and individuals to develop, particularly as we come out of the pandemic. And there's a number of examples in the report of that. I'm going to hand over to Alison in a moment, Chair, but I just wanted to say, and I said this last time, how proud I am of the way in which the library staff, managers have supported individuals and communities throughout the pandemic. They really did go the extra mile. I feel that the value of libraries, the county's library service, is understood and valued more than ever. And I hope that as members, you're seeing the impacts at local level of the investment that's come through the administration, and also the physical changes and the new ways of working we've introduced. And we thank members for their continued support for the service. I'm going to hand over to Alison now, hopefully. Alison, if you would like to in any way enhance anything I've said there or build on anything out, but particularly if members would like to introduce any local questions or any points of clarity. So Alison, can I hand over to you?
Thanks, Nigel. I think I'd just like to say that our programme of service redesign has obviously had to flex and adapt to cope with the impact of the pandemic. So I now think that we're on a programme of service redesign and recovery. So obviously we hope to recover the best of what we did before, but to adapt it to meet the needs that have changed during the pandemic. So for instance, as an example, looking at our virtual events becoming hybrid models, so people can still watch them from their own home if they feel more comfortable doing that. But we are aware that for some people to actually watch it in the company of others is a far more rewarding experience. So we're looking to roll out our hybrid events that started at the end of January. I think to highlight is during the pandemic, we weren't idle by any means. And one of the initiatives that we did establish were the business and intellectual property centres that are based in Berwick, Hexham and Morpeth, and that because they are British Library funded resources that complement the work of Advanced Northumberland in the South East. So there are free resources available to entrepreneurs, small businesses and people who maybe have sort of a desire to explore those alternatives as a result of the pandemic, or just, you know, because they've come up with a good idea that they want to see if they can put into practice. That is leading now, as we move out of the pandemic and we can have more events, leads to are coming up in the course of the next few months at libraries across the county. I think that's all I want to say. I'm more than happy to take questions.
Excellent, thanks for that. Yeah, you're breaking up a bit, Alison, so we shall see.
Right. Okay.
So I notice we don't have Jeff Watson here, but the leader's here. I don't know whether he wants to add anything to this or... No. Okay, excellent. So do we have any questions? Councillor Carty, sorry about that. I suddenly forgot your name.
Hey, once seen, never forgotten. Let's get this right. I'm not having that. Right, first of all, I just want to praise the Communities Together programme, because I used that a lot during the pandemic, especially when using the community centre. So it was a really, really good community effort by everybody. Well done. The one thing that I would like to ask is, could the library service look to having some kind of signpost and register, so when people do come into the library, you might get an elderly person who wants to come in and join a lunch club, or you might get an elderly person or any member of the public come in, want to join a craft class or an art group or something. Because here in the community centres, local community centres, we have these facilities, and it's about using the knowledge, using the services. It's about a good networking thing, really. It's about working together. And if you could signpost to places like the community centres, it would be really good, or the over 50s forums that's going on in the town. But it's about getting some kind of signpost and log built up, so you know what else is available out there, which aren't businesses but they're charities. The other thing, that it's just a quick question, and it just struck us, and you probably already do this, Nigel. I'd be very surprised if you don't, right? When you're working with the children and all that in the library, do all your staff get, in all your apprentices, are they all DBS enhanced checked with an enhanced disclosure?
Alison, do you want to pick up on DBS?
Are they
Yes.
all enhanced?
Currently, no, they're not, councillor, because we're very clear about the way those sorts of events are conducted, in that a member of staff is never left alone with a group of children, either because their parents or the teaching staff are in attendance. Obviously, it's something we keep under constant review, and it could change in the future, but currently that is not the case. Can I take up your other point about the signposting to other community opportunities? I'm confident that, despite the fact there is currently no formal process for that to happen, our staff have excellent local knowledge, and they will be doing that as a matter of course in their daily interactions with customers. We always are very keen to support our users and inquiries that they make. So we are in discussions with partners about how a more readily available resource for staff to use as that reference tool is going to be. Certainly, I'm confident that I have a very good local knowledge, and if you're aware of any organisations that aren't been signposted to currently, I'd be more than happy to take that up and make sure that opportunities are advertised.
Thank you.
Nigel, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to Councillor Carty. I think the solution for that, or the solution to that one, or more information for that one, would be I can source through Maureen Taylor. Northumberland Communities Together have a group of locality coordinators, and that's their exact role, is to make those links between community organisations. But something myself and Alison are very keen on, that the libraries and the localities, the libraries have a very strong knowledge of their localities, and we encourage community groups, organisers, local champions to actually come in and have that dialogue with the staff as well. So we'd certainly welcome you, Councillor Carty, to come and have a conversation.
Okay, Brian?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, congratulations to you and your staff through everything that they've done through COVID. Went well above what they really should have in their roles, but a thank you has to be said to the staff as well. I take a great deal of encouragement around you linking up with new partners and partnerships. And the statement that you said, that good to see, you know, that as we went through COVID, what worked and what didn't. And I think that will make the organisation even more stronger. The drive towards digital, you know, we've got to be very mindful that a lot of people are connected to the digital, but there are a lot of people that aren't. So I know that you'll have your radar on that, but we have to be aware of that as well. And the one thing that I've been asked to raise by another councillor is generally an update around the mobile library service. You know, where do you see that developing, and how do you see that changing? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Certainly, yes. I think some of the learning about the digital side of things from the pandemic were that residents did, you know, even those who did have devices, sometimes use them for very limited uses. So I think there's a number of aspects that we can support them with. That might be using their own device for a wider range of activities, such as engaging with the council. But we're very keen to develop our work in supporting people to get online. Both initially, we've set up, as I say, the digital helpline that can help people. But, you know, if they're coming in to use our own PCs, you know, we can provide them with opportunities to learn those new skills, either in a group setting, is the aspect that we'd really like to develop. But we do have digital champions who can spend some one-to-one time with people so that they can learn at their own pace and in a way that suits them. I think on the mobile library front, I'm pleased to say we are working with our colleagues in Northumberland Communities Together to actually come up with a new vehicle, new design of vehicle that will replace the existing vehicles, hopefully later this year, that will have a more multi-purpose function. So it will still provide book stock, but it will also be able to be used for outreach. So the outreach activities that Northumberland Communities Together have developed during lockdown, the library services has tried to support, and that's been really useful to get the message about libraries out to sections of the community who might not necessarily sort of think the library is for them. So we're hoping that these new vehicles will very much enable us to get that message out further and maybe with more emphasis.
Yeah, you want to come back, Brian? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. Probably one thing that I forgot to mention as well was I like the idea of the library hubs being of the new positions and proximities of where you're going to put them. Probably this is a leading question, but the white paper and the levelling up at the moment for bus transport and the funds that are coming will see the bus journeys dramatically reduced. So it's just to be very mindful that you could be putting something there where a bus stop is at the moment, but in the future it may not be there. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillor.
Okay, I've just, if everyone's finished, I just got a couple of questions to ask Nigel. The report, this is just me being my usual picky self. The library strategy 2021 to 26, but in the report it's actually 2021 to 2025. So has something moved, or is that just an error?
No, Chair, I think we can safely say that's just an error. Apologies for that.
That's not a problem. And you were talking about the digital stuff, and you said you were using BorrowBox. Is that something we've devised, or is it some software you've bought from somewhere else?
No, Chair, it's a platform we bought in. Alison, do you want to explain the benefits of BorrowBox and
Yes.
how we've got to that from where we were?
Yeah, I will do. Thank you. Prior to my coming to the county, we were using two providers, BorrowBox and an additional one for the e-audio resource. That was far more clunky. So what we decided to do is, because feedback was that it was difficult to use, is we went all in with BorrowBox, which is a provider. And with ebooks and e-audio, you don't actually purchase a copy, you purchase a license. And so they operate as a broker and arrange arrange deals with publishers, so that, you know, the consortia of library services that are subscribing to BorrowBox then get the pick of the material produced by those publishers. So we then purchase a license for a duration, and BorrowBox provide us with that content, but also with the curation and a lot of additional publicity around the material.
Excellent, thank you. That's an annoying noise outside, isn't it? Anyway, so I think that was really all I wanted to ask about, other than the reason this came here. If you remember, those of us who were here last time, I think we decided that we wanted to see how the strategy worked, rather than just look at it at the beginning and then kind of let it be. That's why it's back here. And I was just hoping that you might give us some idea of whether you think we've stuck to the strategy and has it worked properly. Is there something you want to change in it? And are you confident that you'll be able to deliver the rest of it?
Supremely confident, Chair, on that one. There's a number of areas we need to explore. Like I say, I feel we're in in terms of the stabilisation of the core service. We've seen tangible examples of how that is working through. The library hubs are established, so effectively now, obviously there's always room for innovation, but we've got a really stable platform now going forward. That third phase is really now where we're in the extending the reach and partnerships. And that's really, there isn't an end game in this. This is more a way of working to try to do the best we can to engage with local communities. And I think that for me, the mission is really to really understand the needs of those local communities, so that people do feel that the offer is absolutely appropriate to their areas, to their needs, and also that the usage profile of the service reflects those local communities. That's the benchmark for me in that. So generally, obviously, it's a challenging time, as we still are beginning to understand people's attitude to re-engagement. And I think it's like you said, Chair, Councillor Gallagher might have said, there's been, I don't see there's any positives out of COVID, but there has been learning. And I think going forward as a library service, we're very much self-aware. When you look at the mix we'll have between the agile mobile libraries, the very strong digital core, combined with the public library service, fueled by the additional capacity that's put in working on evident and agreed need, with a commitment to keep that dialogue with with residents, I think we're in a good place, Chair.
Excellent. Well, with that, I think we think that the strategy is being delivered. I think we're all happy with that. We encourage you to carry on with it, and maybe, you know, you want to come back at some point and tell us how we're getting on, because it'll not be long before you've got to start writing the 26 to 30 odd strategy. Okay, so
Thank you, Chair.
with that, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. And thanks, Alison.
Thank you.
But we're now going to move on to the next item, and Nigel, if you want to stay, you're more than welcome. But I'm sure you've got other things to do.
Actually, if I may stay for half an hour, I'm generally interested to hear this.
Oh well, yeah, absolutely, not a problem. And here was me thinking that wasn't going to happen anyway. So we're going to I think we're going to get Matt Baker to speak to us first, are we? And then we'll maybe get the leader to have a chip in, and then we shall bombard. Well, at least one of us will bombard Matt with questions. Carry on.
Mr. Chairman, would you mind very much if I just did a brief introduction?
Absolutely not,
Matt-
leader. Go
Matt
right
is-
ahead.
Matt is the expert here. I'm not the expert at all, but I have been very keen to make sure that climate change, like all members have been keen to see it become an integral part of what we do as a council. It was about 3 years ago now when a number of action groups were asking councils to declare a climate emergency and petitioning them to do that. And we actually didn't want to wait to be petitioned. We met up with a local action group and decided that we were going to declare a climate change emergency without being petitioned to do that. And that got off, all of those dialogues made us get off to a good start with dealing with local groups and those people, and they are across the county, particularly still at school, a lot of them, who are actually passionate about the need for us to take climate change very seriously. So we set up, it was about 3 years ago, we set up a steering group, which has grown in size and stature and has a number of a wide range of interested parties helping us move our climate change action plan forward. We also have an all-party member working group, and we have very good joined-up sensible discussions there. The whole point about this is that over this past 3 years, Matt and his team, still a small team, but a very, very good quality team, I think, have done a significant amount of work, both through small things like the free tree offer to really massive, really key things that we need to be looking at, like home insulation and heat source pumps and so on. For me, one of the dangers about climate change is that it is actually quite a technical subject, and that's difficult for me sometimes to understand. And if I can't understand it, then I'm assuming most average people like me, with medium intelligence, will find it difficult as well. So I've always tried to say to Matt, "Whoa, steady down. Let's just keep this in a language that I understand," and he has done that. But it is a very technical area, but it doesn't need to be. And I think the paper that he's going to speak to now demonstrates the amount of work that he and his brilliant team have done. That has become an integral part of our policies in the council, integral, for example, into our new local plan. The next stage that we're moving into is working within communities and setting up community groups. And at the budget this year, which everyone welcomed, there was a new £50,000 community chest fund opened for local communities to bid into to do local work around environmental improvements and so on. So we all play a part in this. I can only say, Mr. Chairman, that I'm really grateful to Matt and his team and the people who've done so much work on this. I'm very proud of what our officers have done. I'm very proud of our members who have been hugely supportive throughout of all parties. It is the right thing to be doing. And if I may just pass on to him, and any difficult questions he will answer. If there's any simple ones, I will.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Matt, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Yeah, so I'll just give a bit of a kind of summary of the report, and then happy to kind of take any questions. So I guess to start by saying two things. So climate change is a kind of moving feast, and there was an IPCC report published just a few days ago, which kind of set out quite a stark level of detail. I think it was 4,200 pages. I haven't read them all, but there is a lot of stuff coming out quickly around where we are in terms of climate change. And if people haven't, I would kind of strongly encourage people to look at what Antonio Guterres said, who's the Secretary for the United Nations, about that report, because he kind of summed it up pretty well in about 5 minutes, and it's kind of easily Googleable. What I would say, and what's kind of become super clear over the last sort of 18 months, is that whilst this is about net zero, and net zero is obviously incredibly important for us in terms of our role in climate change as a council, it's also about community engagement. It's about inward investment. It's about tackling key socioeconomic issues like fuel poverty. It's about education, and it's about stewardship of the county. And net zero for me at the moment comes sort of after that as a consequence of those things. And without that buy-in and engagement in a way which is sustainable for our farming community, our residents, our rural economy, then this just won't work. So ultimately, the heart of climate change, it's the biggest behavioural change programme that we've ever seen in the world. And that's why we're doing all this work around community engagement, because ultimately we need to be able to get the right low carbon solutions into people's homes which help them, be that to move around, be that to heat and power how they live. And that's something which is going to take time and take a lot of hard work and effort from everybody in the council, all members, all staff, and also all residents. And I don't think we can underestimate that. In terms of what we've done so far, I guess to sort of rattle through some of the key achievements. Before we came in here, I got a kind of pre-grilling by Jeff, by the chair, I should say, which was, he pointed out there's 152,000 homes in the county, which is correct. So we've engaged with around 16% of households through various different climate schemes over the last 18 months. So I don't know if this is entirely true, but I'll kind of go out there and say that's probably more engagement aside from the kind of statutory day-to-day services that we have to deliver as a council to everybody. So we've managed to kind of get out there and start to make that connection with a lot of households and a lot of people from a range of areas and a range of wards. Not everywhere, but we need to get everywhere, and that's certainly part of the plan going forward. In terms of work that we've done, so we've got more electric charges per head than any other local authority, which you could argue other people need to kind of catch up. You could argue we haven't got many people compared to some local authorities in our county, but we are certainly doing our bit in terms of the EV network across our county, and that's something which we're going to look to accelerate over the next 3 years. And again, a kind of key part of that is going to be getting these charge points into places which are basically accessible for people who wouldn't be able to put one into their home. So again, we're trying to tackle the affordability angle as well as the climate angle in terms of charging. We've started to focus on upgrades to people's homes in terms of heating, insulation, and power. And recent storm events have kind of really brought into light the importance for kind of resilience around those models. So, heat pumps could be part of a solution, but we're also looking at things like synthetic fuel, which I'll happily take questions on as an alternative, especially for older properties in the county which might not be suitable for an electric system. And in a previous scrutiny committee, one of the members asked the question about the balance between in-house delivery and private sector delivery, and that's something now which we are starting to bring a little bit closer in-house, so we can be much more targeted and directed in the communities that we're trying to get these solutions to, rather than through what sometimes feels like faceless call centres. So that's something which we're going to trial through the next 6 months. And then by the end of the year, we'll have planted nearly 3 million new trees as part of the Great Northumberland Forest. Worth a little clarification. So this isn't as building another or planting another Kielder. This is about pockets of forest with the right tree in the right place, which together come to make the Great Northumberland Forest as a a huge increment of carbon sequestration capability. Again, the kind of recent storm events have made that even more important, and links to what we were already planning to do, but accelerated because of the storm events. We'll also start to look at how we manage some of that woodland, and that'll be obviously linked into the clear up process as part of Storm Alwyn, and I think Simon was probably the main one that caused the disruption that we've seen. And then the final thing is we'd already targeted as part of delivering net zero by 2030 to reduce the emissions we are responsible for as a county council by 50% by 2025. So we've managed to do that ahead of schedule, and part of the reason for that is the interventions we've made in terms of solar generation, in terms of what we've done around replacing heating systems, and the like, which has made a difference. Part of it is definitely due to reduction of business miles because of COVID, and we've tried to model that into our plan, and we think even accounting for that, we probably have hit the 50% point. So the team are now away looking at what a realistic net zero target would be for the council going forward, and that would also need to account for any woodland which the council is responsible for. And then I guess finally, in terms of results, before I just sort of touch upon the challenges, and I will go through the recommendations in a little bit of detail, I kind of just wanted to sort of echo a little bit what Glenn said, but also the fact that Nigel's kind of interested to stay. So, climate change has been a really interesting event for the council, which has really pulled together officers from every single different service. At one point in the draft of this paper, we started listing them out, and then we realised we'd listed them all. And so, we've got these cross-cutting groups which are gripping policy, for example, starting to grip procurement, for example, which bring together lots of aspects of the council into one place. And that galvanisation behind that Northern Star, if you like, of net zero is something which people really kind of get behind and can buy into. And we've seen that in our offices, and we've seen that in our services. And we've also seen that in the kind of cross-party effects that we've had around climate change. That's something which I'm kind of incredibly kind of grateful for, that people have kind of engaged in that way. Kind of looking ahead and going forward, net zero by 2030 is going to be very hard, and I would be lying if I said anything else. It's going to be very difficult for lots of reasons. But to kind of pick up on three of the challenges specifically, which we can do something about. So the first one's about resident community partnerships and business partnerships as well. And as I kind of said at the beginning, for climate change to work as a concept, as a solution for what we're trying to do around net zero, we're going to need residents, we're going to need businesses and communities to change how they work, how they behave. So accelerating, increasing, broadening how we engage with residents and communities is going to be incredibly important. And if anything, the recent climate events, if you like, has made that even more important. And then the next thing is about in-house delivery. So as we go forward to make sure what we do is accessible and affordable for our communities, we think we're going to have to do more ourselves. And with that, that's going to require us to be really open and engage in a dialogue, and that will, I kind of hope, require some scrutiny, that we make the right decisions around the things that we want to do as a council versus which things we want to lean into the private sector to do on our behalf. And I don't think there won't be any easy answers in there. There'll be a lot of grey, and there'll be a need for a lot of collective decision making. And I kind of flag that now and flag that early, because that's something which, if we go into, I'd want to do in a really transparent and visible way, and get a lot of scrutiny and buy-in to. And then the kind of last point in terms of challenges is around scope. So COP26 from a few months ago started to change the scope a little bit around some of the conversation for climate change. And a couple of good examples of that are, where does methane fit into this picture? I won't kind of launch into the technical side of that, but that's something which we need to understand and get our heads around, because that requirement will start to kind of come towards us from government, I'm sure. And then there are some to answer that completely, things like green finance. So, there are things we control, but then, we spend a lot of money as a council on different things, and we finance that in different ways. We work with a bank, and, what then happens to our money once it leaves this building? And, I think that there are some things around that space which, we should have an open and honest dialogue around, but that will again be difficult and complex and not straightforward to resolve. In terms of the recommendations, they're kind of on page 3. The first two are kind of similar, so we're really going to work hard, and we started this actually on Monday with the policy group, to really grip how we insert climate change into the governance process in a more formal way. So we have a carbon impact assessment which we require of all policy decisions, but it feels like there's more we can do to kind of grip that policy agenda. And this isn't about policy decisions which would be no carbon, but it's about them being net zero if we do make certain decisions, and that's what kind of 1 and 2 are really about. The third one is around what we might call kind of climate awareness training rather than literacy training. That word might not work for everybody, but really this is about that kind of baseline understanding of why are we doing what we're doing, and what will it mean if we don't deliver on net zero? Because whilst people do know, I think there's something about that consistent understanding across the council, which is really important. And that links into the next point around making sure we have a statutory mandatory training offer for all of our staff, just to kind of get that baseline of understanding and knowledge. And then finally, the climate change community fund that we've been talking about, that becomes a really important way to engage the community, but also a really important, I think, tool in our kit box in terms of how we get knowledge from the community back into what we're doing. So we're just in the process of designing kind of how that works, but an example of what I think we will bring into that will be, for every grant that we issue, we'll have a requirement on the if you like, the kind of the recipient of that grant to come back and attend some sort of event with us so they can communicate to a wider audience exactly what they did and why, and somehow connect that into some of that climate awareness training so we can really extend the reach of what we're doing. And you could see how that could link into some of the work that Nigel and his team do, which we've kind of heard about already. So there'll be a real reciprocal arrangement about that. I'd just like to finish with I guess the sort of usual thanks, but probably to extend that. So the team that are working on this, I think are exceptional. They're a fantastic set of people who are kind of committed to this, and without their effort, none of this could have happened. But I would quickly extend that, because it isn't just about the kind of nucleus of the team. It is about every single officer that is connected into this and connected into this kind of shared vision. And again, without that kind of shared responsibility and that togetherness, if you will, this would not have happened. It would have been impossible. And that extends to the members and probably most importantly, the residents, because ultimately it's the residents who on the end of this will need to do something different. And, this is truly something which will touch upon everyone if we're to be successful. So that's the kind of summary. I know there's more detail in here, and happy to take any questions.
Excellent, Matt. That was clear. Questions, anyone? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry I was late. Can I ask about member involvement in questions that are frequently asked by the public? Now, I was asked a question the other day, for example, where the research I had to do, I'm still not sure I've got the answer. Is there a means of members going directly to an appropriate point to get detailed questions answered? For example, and I use this only as an example, you're building an underground heat pump at the Community Leisure Centre at Alnwick. What's that cost? What's it saving? What's the general picture in terms of what it's contributing from the council's point of view? I found it quite difficult to get that answer. I haven't got it yet, actually. Is there going to be an easier means for members to get those questions answered through a direct route? Who do we go to and how do we do it? Thank you.
Yes, so the quickest and easiest way is just to email climatechange@northumberland.gov.uk, and then the question will get answered in quite a lot of detail. But one of the things we are going to do, in parallel. So we've run about, I think it's 4 now or 5 question and answer events with the public, and there's a number of kind of themes across there. Without me getting too nerdy about it, we can analyse the pattern in those questions quite easily now. So we're also going to create a kind of Q&A landing point to basically kind of go for the more kind of generic questions around climate change. So that's something which we're going to build, and I think that kind of microsite concept for climate change is really important around the awareness and engagement. So the simplest answer right now is just email that inbox, or if not, email me directly and I'll push it into the inbox. And we're pretty good now at kind of turning those things around. I think the SLA is maybe like sort of 10 working days, so we should be able to kind of get you into that process, no problem.
Thank you for that. And is that what you mean in recommendations for carbon literacy training for members, that that kind of information will be passed so members are better informed than they might otherwise be?
So it isn't actually. Ideally, we would like all members to do the carbon literacy or the carbon awareness training, which basically is 2 half-day commitments. It's something which, in the recommendations, we're recommending, and I hope is agreed, that the Cabinet and the Executive team are going to do. But we will be very open to facilitating a kind of member-wide activity. And I think there'll be a real statement to our residents around how important this is to us. So that's slightly different from the kind of general questions.
Is that all right? Yep. Richard Dodd.
Yeah, I take a big interest in this, and I think we're in 2 or 3 perfect storms at the minute, pardon the pun. But Storm Arwen has given us some direction into which way the wind is going to blow in the future, which is we're going to get more storms, as we've seen this last couple of weeks. I don't know if they get any bigger, but it's certainly making people think. And the other storm is what's happening across in Europe and the price of fuel, because I think all of us are going to go, ow, when we go to the petrol pump, or we turn the gas or fill the oil tank or whatever it is up. So I think the chase is on to find these alternative, greener energies. I mean, I'm doing it myself. I'm looking at solar panels for my farm. Not the big field ones, but just enough to do the house and the farm. And I think, I'm going to see the planner after this meeting, because I'm nearly writing a cheque for the application, which is, easier on. However, I live in the green belt, and that comes with restrictions, and I'm only partly through the process, but because of the green belt, there has to be certain hoops to go through. So, I mean, I'll report back on how easy it is or uneasy it is to get permission in certain areas, and the size. And I think Councillor Castle hit on it there about what do we need, because if you read certain websites, you don't need plan permission at all. But me being on plan for 31 years, there are things that you need to have to go green. And again, it's not a cheap option, but it might be cheaper than the bills that we're all going to face in electricity. So there's a number of things that are going to be accelerated. Councillor Gallagher, Hardy and I had a conversation about the damage of Storm Arwen. And, can you not just take the trees out and plant them where there's holes in the woods? It's not as easy as that. And people will not understand that the whole wood has got to come out if it's badly damaged, because it's not cheap to get people in to clear them, take them out and then replant them, and then you can't come back every year taking the trees that's ready to come out. So that there is an opportunity for a rethink or a reset on how we do things. And I think that the missing bit of information is that an awful lot of trees are planted already. I've got another, making no bones about it, another farm in Scotland, and we're taking a wood out there, and it has to be replanted. That's part of the licence. You can't just say, oh, I'll take that load of trees out and turn it into wheat fields or whatever. There are rules and regs. Where I think we need to get some lessons, because my farm was sort of undamaged in the storm where all other ones around us were hit, was shelter belts. And I think we need to do that in our planning system, where, you know, we're saying big applications, 500 houses. And I think there's an opportunity in the planning system to come, and, you know, we're coming up to the 5-year review of our plan. I know it's just gone through, but we are coming up to the 5-year, and you've been on that committee along with me, where I think we could build in to the planning system sort of community woods, because that was sort of mentioned in the report about community ownership. Because let's face it, if you build 500 houses, they're all looking for somewhere to walk a dog. And I think that, you know, we could make some, what I'd call impressive changes at some point to plant trees, wildlife corridors, shelter, you name it. Because trees, I know they fall over now and again, big winds, but they do shelter everybody else. So I think I look forward to this document progressing through, but I think we are now, we've had some warnings, and as I say, the other warning is how much is it going to cost to heat your house or put a light on. And I think the warnings are that we've got to accelerate whatever we're doing to get alternative energy. I welcome everything that's been said, but I think we need to ratchet it up. Thank you.
Yeah, I've just got a quick comment. I'm pleased as I've taken on board planting the right tree in the right place, because that's one of the things that I really feel the county needs to do. I want to know a little bit more about the £50,000 climate change budget for groups. Have you any idea when that might become live, when people can start to apply? And can you give us a little few more examples? I know you gave the library as an example, but a few little examples of what you are looking for when you're expecting people to apply for this kind of fund. Thank you.
Yeah, the leader might want to answer the thing about when it's going to be available, unless Matt knows.
As long as I know, I just want the answer. It doesn't matter who answers this.
There are a number of ways that local members can help with local groups, I think most of us will have a group or two, or even more than that, who are doing dedicated work on climate change. So there is this new fund that we announced at the budget of £50,000, which local groups can bid into, because we think that money will actually help grow the work that local groups can do. So we just need local members to encourage those groups to bid into this and to then pick up the schemes. I think I'm right in saying, I may be wrong, but I think we've got about 26 local community groups, Matt, or is it more now?
Yeah, it's about that, yeah.
About that. So please, if you know of anybody or any group,
You know I run them.
well, so there you go. This fund will open fairly soon, and if you know, it'd be really great if we could do that. I think the other thing is that we are more than happy to come and talk to any group now we're able to. We've had these online meetings with the public, which has worked very well. The last one was over 100 people attended that. But we're keen to get back out again and into schools and into community groups, and Matt and others and myself are more than happy to come and give a talk anytime to try and you know, encourage people and show what might be available. Okay.
Okay, was there anything?
Yeah, it was just an example. Sorry, it was just an example of what you're looking for. You know, because I run a few community groups, so.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back on that, and maybe on sort of Councillor Dodd's point as well, if that's okay. Yeah. So it's early days. So this is sort of work in progress, and I haven't discussed this with the leader yet. So he might not fully agree yet. So I think in terms of going live, I want us to go live on the 1st of April, because that's when we can spend the money from. We're going to basically facilitate it through the community chest process, so because there's an existing mechanism to do that. The idea being we'll probably open up for bids, probably in tranches, and see how quickly the money goes. So probably open up bids until probably the end of May, June, that kind of time. the way that we're going to, we think, ask for bids is we're going to say, tell us about what you want to do. What it needs to do is fit the following kind of three criteria. So tell us which bit of the climate action plan it kind of fits to, and we'll list them out. So is it about heating, sequestration, about waste? Is it about, you know, power, whatever? But it's got to align to the action plan, because the action plan's evidence-based, so we want it to be kind of targeted and focused. Tell us how many residents are going to benefit from what you're doing. And obviously, the more, the better. And tell us how long you think it will be before we kind of, you finish the work, we see a result. That's kind of the broad sort of structure. And then what we're thinking about, and this is definitely sort of for shaping, and we haven't yet decided, is we might say, here are some examples of a community project which might benefit from, say, £500 of funding. And an example of that might be if you're going to run some sort of for example, other places available, but ANIC are about to do a series of engagement events with the rural community, looking at sustainable farming, and that links then into some things around sequestration, and they might want some funding to kind of support that actual sort of event within ANIC. So it would be kind of one group of people be interested in kind of hearing from. Another group might be, if you want to bid for a little bit more money, say £1,000, you might actually want to do kind of more of a project. So maybe you want to get a load of saplings for, let's say, the local school or a local community group, and do some kind of group planting. And then we also think we might offer a third tier, which is for, you know, maybe a bit more money, sort of, you know, £3,000-4,000, but as a way to match fund for bidding for grants. So there are some community groups that are quite active. So there's one upon sort of Norham Way up towards Holy Island, and they're talking about kind of community generation power schemes, which is kind of really exciting. But to do that, they would need to hire some consultants to kind of do some feasibility work. So this might be a way for them to get some funding, which they then could match through some community fundraising, so they could access something a bit bigger. So, you know, the reality is we kind of don't care, right, what the project is, provided it aligns to the plan, it helps loads of residents, and, you know, it's deliverable in a time frame which, you know, we can kind of see the result from. And then the kind of quid pro quo will be, as I kind of said in the intro, we'll want them to come back. We'll probably try and run some sort of whole day events across the county, where they kind of come to us, tell us what they've done, but not just tell us, tell the local community. So then when the next wave comes, people go, oh, right, okay, I'm quite inspired by doing that. So when the next tranche comes, we can kind of bid for some more funding. So that's the kind of loose, I guess, kind of concept that we're working to. But it would start with, you know, kind of guidance, sort of as soon as we can. We could start engaging now, run a process, like I say, through to kind of May, June time. We'd do a panel, because we've got to follow due diligence in terms of kind of where the money's going, and, you know, kind of who's met the criteria in the normal way, and then get the kind of first sort of projects kind of going from like June, July. That's kind of where we are right now. Just to pick on some of your points, Councillor, so a bit of reassurance about the planning. So when I said before we're sort of trying to grip policy and grip procurement, the other place we're gripping is planning. So Rob Murphy and I, Director of Planning, work quite closely together. We kind of meet most weeks, but we are now a consulted party on any planning application which has a climate impact. So your planning application for solar panels, for example, and other, you know, kind of people may also do that, we would then review. So your point around kind of that Rob describes it much better than I do. He's a planning expert, I am not, about that kind of trade-off of things that you're doing when it comes to planning applications. And obviously what we'll be advocating as part of that process is the net zero element of those things. So you know, the idea being that as those things come through, we'll be part of that kind of challenge process. Now, will that fix everything? I'm absolutely sure it will not. But it is a good step towards kind of working within the current system. And then the second bit to that is, as part of the planning review, I'm pretty content and happy that Rob will be engaging with us very, very closely to make sure that the next version of that, the iteration of that, is really congruent with the plan for net zero. So that's the kind of the more sort of strategic side. So while that's happening, we're kind of gripping the application, because that felt like the kind of most prudent way to try and kind of get some control now. Just two other points really quickly. So your woodland management point in the report, we talk about actually doing a bit more woodland management in-house through the Great Northumberland Forest team. That's on it's page 8, I think, on this report. So that is something which we absolutely, I think, need to look at, because I'm not sure how available that kind of service really is for most people. So that's something which we're looking at, not just for our woodland, but could that be something which we might offer up as well as an external service? And then your point around fuel independence, we could talk about that for the next few hours if I was allowed, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. But one of the things that's at the heart of that, I think, is looking at kind of synthetic alternatives to things like kerosene. So if we think about our housing stock in the county, I don't mean the councils, I mean the county, a large amount of it is off the gas grid, is old, and is perhaps not suitable to kind of electric-based heat pumps and solutions. So one of the guys in our team, and you know, must acknowledge Councillor Moffat's role in this as well. Between them, kind of flagged to me synthetic fuel, which is effectively a way to mimic kerosene, mimic diesel, which could be used in running large vehicles, and we're going to do a pilot with some of the HDVs up in Berwick with that solution, and possibly some of the fire units as well. And that same fuel could be used in boilers. There's a few more kind of legislative hurdles around the kind of use of it as a fuel, which at the moment makes it costly. But that's something which we're going to dig into. We're doing a bit of research with Newcastle University to kind of really get underneath that. And then, you know, depending on what comes out of that, we will probably ask Councillor Sanderson to put a motion to full council to then effectively get some buy-in to that as a whole council in terms of really campaigning quite hard on trying to get after some of those things, because that feels like a really important tool for us unlocking that part of our low carbon economy. And that's kind of referred to on, I think it's page 13. So I kind of completely agree with the points you were making, and kind of happy to take any other feedback around what we might do once you've been through that experience yourself. But I just wanted to give you some assurance that we are absolutely looking at some of those things.
Okay. It's this come out of that, Eileen, does it? Well, just to remind you then, I'm taking Eileen back, and then it's Brian Gallagher, and then it's Mark Mather, and then it's Nick Morford.
It's really just very quickly, regarding Blythe, right, there's lots and lots of house building going on there, but we don't like have loads of trees, so it'd be nice to actually put loads of trees up there. What I've noticed in Blythe, we've got like a solar panel farm going to come out. Up, I think it's 100 and God, that's hundreds of acres of this greenfield land going to be used as a solar panel farm. I think really, if that was on a brownfield site, it would be much better, so we could keep our green fields and even plant trees there. But to be honest, there's so much house building going on, but we really need to look at having loads more trees in Blythe and probably the urban areas. You know, you've got lots of nice trees in the country, but we need to look at the urban areas and get them right, because in them areas they're going to have more car pollution and everything like that. Do you know what I mean? So really want that in our areas, and if you could, if solar panels in the right place. Sorry.
Yeah, happy to. I don't know specifically about the solar panel farm that you're referring to. Let me take that away. I just don't know the process for getting more. I agree with your points completely about the kind of the environmental impact, especially in urban areas, and how planting can kind of help with that, and also helps the kind of education side of that. I just don't know what the process will be to try and affect that change, but I'm happy to take that away and look into that.
Brian Gallagher, Mark Mather, and Nick Morford.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and everything that's been done within Northumberland up until now. I want to commend the council. As Glenn rightly said, 3 years ago we started this programme away, and I think we were at the very first meeting at the Morpeth Town Hall when there was more officers there than what there were members of the public. So it's moved on a lot, which draws its own concerns. As this project, a much needed project, moves on, we need to control it. And I get a concern that we go into a direction where we can't control it and it goes into various groups. It's great to see that residents and businesses and partners are all getting connected with the project, but it's an in-house delivery of climate change, and I think we've got to look externally as well, take our external partners with us, but not to control it. You know, you rightly said that there are going to be decisions made, and there'll be decisions made in grey areas as well. The planning process, I do think that has to have a rethink. No, we can look at that as a Northumberland base, but I know our hands are tied nationally through the policies. But I think for Northumberland, we need to develop and change with the times and be very swift to change with them and understand various problems. And my colleague rightly said that, you know, what happens in the urban and the rural areas is completely different, and we'll have to take them on two different scales. But with planning, we also have to be more, use the enforcement arm of the NCC, which I don't think we are at this moment in time. So the reality is, you know, as that training process goes along, take the enforcement with you. I was a bit concerned about how much time we're going to spend on training for staff, because in theory that's 1 day, and you know, for the number of staff that we've got, that's a lot of time away from programs of work that we're behind on, especially within planning. So maybe, you know, we'll review that, look at maybe team leaders, supervisors looking at that and filtering that information back in a timely way that doesn't affect the program of their work. Coming back to the policy, you know, we've got to keep a hold of this policy, because I'm unsure of where climate change champions come in on this. And my concern is that they, and through my experience, are contacting officers direct to ask for meadowland, trees planted. You know, these guys have still got a programme of work to do, so they, although it's an excellent idea, have to be controlled and brought in. And you mentioned something about an action group. I think a small group of people have to drive that policy forward and control it. You mentioned about electric chargers as well. And I think electric chargers, we need to know the decisions of electric chargers. We need to know where they're going in at as elected members, and whether it's the town through all the elected members or the ward member gets to know where they're going, because there was a charging point put in my town where the local member didn't even know it was going there, and we were maybe suggested a better area. So I'm a bit concerned about who makes them decisions. I think the decisions have to be made, but that could be better sites. Cycling, you know, same again, there are schemes being put in around Northumberland, and every town is different. So, for example, a new town like Cramlington against two old towns like Ashington and Blythe, the policies are different, where you know, we have to get enforcement around there on cycle tracks where vehicles are just parking in the cycle tracks, which is making it more difficult. So, you know, that's something we need to look at. The recycling of the glass and food waste is an excellent one. We need to accelerate that faster than what it is if we need to go forward. Councillor Bridges highlighted the issues with the heat pumps. They're great, but through storms, you know, they became a hindrance to those people and made those people vulnerable in the rural areas. And just to remind everybody, we had Stone Armon in November, Barra in December, Curry in January, Dudley in February, and Eunice in February as well. So these are ongoing things that we've got to address. And how far has the storms, the storms I've just mentioned, have they affected your programme in any way? And finally, I'm very mindful that the start date was 2010 that you started doing your data on this. I wonder if the issues, if we'd looked at it 2015 as a start of policy, where would we be with our climate change policy now?
Can I just make one observation
Of course you
on
can,
those
Leader.
questions, which is around the importance of this work and ensuring we stay on course and committed and focused, and ultimately that's my responsibility. And what I've done over the past 3 years is to positively encourage the officers, the small group, the work they're doing. The steering group and the all-member group have kept us right in terms of how ambitious we are trying to be. But ultimately, it will very much be my decision on how far out we go and what we're actually aiming to achieve over the next 3 years. I'm very content with the officers who are doing the work and absolutely happy with the programme. We could do more, but I don't want to try and do too much too quickly, when actually we can all play a part, even if it's turning some lights off or reducing the heat in the washing machine, or taking the bus, which there are many, and going for walks and cycling instead of taking a Mercedes, for example. So these sort of things are all manageable, Brian.
Chair, just to come back on that one point, I totally and utterly agree with your direction. My biggest fear is that this becomes a bigger monster than the small amount of staff that are there to manage it. I welcome it. I think it's great. But I'm just trying to looking over the hill to see in a year's time and in 2 years' time, are we developing such a system that will really give a lot of work back to the council?
And that's absolutely fair comment, and I completely understand what Brian's saying, and I think he's absolutely right. We've got to make sure that we are fit for purpose. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, there's an awful lot of residents who think this is completely unnecessary work for us to be doing, completely wasteful way to spend money. But there's another large section who are passionate that we do even more. So it's finding that balance and making sure that what we do is appropriate and fit for purpose. And as I say, at the moment, I'm really pleased with what we're doing. I'm pleased that we've got a steering group that has people from all kinds of business sitting there, from a hill farmer at the top of the Ingram Valley to a large business in Berwick and the business in Bedlington. There's lots of people helping us with this. And Brian, you're absolutely right. We will need to make sure that we are staying on the right road, and that's where you and other members will come in.
Thanks for that. Matt, can you sweep some of that up?
Yeah, I'm happy to come back on those things if that's okay. So in terms of the EV charging points first, I completely agree. So the idea being that we'll bring it through scrutiny. We're going to bring a proposal for where the next wave of chargers are going to go. So it's going to be really transparent, really clear, and we can we'll take that through kind of governance. And I think in the past that probably has been not as well scrutinised as it could have been. So I think that's absolutely fair and right. In terms of training, I just want to be really clear. So there's two bits of training on offer. There's the carbon literacy training, which is voluntary, which some teams and staff are kind of engaging in. But the stat and man training, which will be much more like a kind of drop-in hour online module, a bit like the GDRP training that we do. So, we absolutely want to be kind of sympathetic to kind of people's workloads and kind of where they are, but we want to make that accessible for both sets of people. So that there's two different things on offer for that. Your point about control. So this is the paradox, isn't it? So we absolutely need organic frontline resident growth and engagement in what we're doing, traded against we don't want to create a monster that we can't control. And if I can be probably bold enough to put it this way, I think that's where we need the members' help to be that connection point. So we can't control it all centrally. You know, we're a small dedicated team. I want to come back onto the kind of the broader piece in a second. But actually, I think through engaging with elected members into those areas, you know your communities better than everybody. So that should be the way that we connect through. And, you know, I think that's something which we need to do more of. But to do that, we need your kind of support and help to do that. And without sparing Councillor Morford's blushes, you know, he does that very, very well. He lets a community group do that, but at the same time is connected into that. So there's a model that works that we can kind of mirror and look at. But I think it's that trade-off that we're trying to create. I completely agree about active transport, and I don't really have anything else to say other than that. I think it's an area we need to really kind of get into and grip. I think the planning point you made is right as well. The point around recycling, I agree. We need to do more of and quicker if we can. And I guess this sort of illustrates the broader point around climate change and net zero. I think we need to stop thinking about climate change as climate change. And actually, it's all of our work and business. So, you know, we talked about planning. The recycling point connects us into local services. There's a whole bunch of things around comms and engagement. So although there's a small dedicated team, I actually see this as every single officer's and every single member's work. So although we talk about, you know, a small number of dedicated people, I actually think we've got 4,500 people who are doing work on climate change. And our kind of effect needs to be, how do we connect it into the everyday things that we do, not through kind of one-off interventions. You know, all of the work we're doing around homes is through housing. You know, it's not through the kind of centralised team. All the work we're doing around EV infrastructure is through technical services. So it's how do we kind of connect the dots and link these things together? And I think that's something which becomes a bit of a blueprint for lots of things, you know, quality, public health, a whole bunch of stuff which actually the council, you know, needs to do kind of everywhere and everything that we do. The point you made about heat pumps and the storm. So I think there's just a little bit of a myth to bust. So every single heat source, be it a gas boiler, a kerosene boiler or a heat pump, requires electricity. So the storms taking out your power and people being vulnerable in their homes and not having power was nothing to do with a heat pump. It's disconnected, it's a myth. The issue is about resilience. So in those vulnerable areas within our communities, you should have a heating source, which could be a kerosene boiler, but fueled with synthetic fuel, could be a gas boiler if you're on the gas grid, could be a heat pump. But you also probably need to have a good old-fashioned wood-burning stove so you can put a log on the fire. And there are definitely examples where we've been retrofitting homes where we've probably made the wrong choice. And I'm happy to kind of say that in terms of removing some of that resilience. And that's something which we're talking to housing about in terms of how going forward and we're in control of the housing stock, do we actually kind of not do that? But I think it's really important in terms of buying an engagement to things like heat pumps, which are the single best low carbon solution for heating your home, is that the storms that happened and the storms taking them out, that's just something that needs to be disconnected quickly, because you had the same issue where I live and I've got a kerosene boiler. I still had no heat because I had no power, because I need power to feed the boiler. And I think it's really important that people kind of understand the kind of reality of things, and you know, that's a good example of it. The point you made around the last one was, I think, was about the storms and the kind of events. I agree that's going to kind of continue going forward. And then, you know, I think the last point you made was that I've written down policy and kind of the policy decisions that we make. So the policy thematic group for climate change has got representation on from all members of all services. So it's a kind of collective group. And I think through that group, through gripping the governance process around policy decisions for climate change, that will give us the kind of collective responsibility. And I think that's the point for me, Brian. It's not about what a small group of people can do. It's about what the whole council can do, and all the members and all the residents together, and taking that collective responsibility for net zero. So, you know, am I nervous about the scale of what we're talking about? Heck yes. I could use different words, but I won't. Is it going to be difficult? Yes. Is it going to require nationally, globally, a significant amount of investment and way beyond anything we saw for COVID? Yes. Does the point which Councillor Dodd made around the link to the truly dreadful things that are going on in Ukraine make even more of a case for fuel security within our county and our country? Absolutely, yes. That connects into climate change, and I think that's why the things you kind of say, I don't kind of share the same concern, because I think I see a broader set of people and a broader kind of I guess kind of purpose than just something to hit net zero. It's kind of much bigger than that.
Thanks for that, Matt. Mark?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say I felt that this was a very positive report, and I get the positive vibes out of it because of the passionate staff, so thank you very much for that. And I think it's positive because I feel it covers the whole of the county. You know, the rural areas are getting EV charging points where they would struggle to access them if it wasn't for support from the county. So I do think it's a positive report. I was going to mention about housing stock and the angle that the council's taken in the past, which you've explained about having dual fuel backups when like sort of a storm hits and the power's out. So that's great that you've already taken that into account, and we're looking at changing that. You've explained about synthetic fuels, because I think the cost of living is scary, especially in rural areas where you have to use a car to get somewhere. Fuel is going to be difficult. So I'll be very interested to hear about that more in the future, whether it's back at this committee or local area councils. I think that's a really interesting point. And I think the staff training's absolutely bang on. I think if we're going to take the whole council on this journey, which we have to, each department needs to know what they're doing and how they can link into you. So I fully welcome staff training and member training. So thank you very much.
Okay. Do you feel as though you need to come back, Mark? Or you right? Okay. Nick?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for the report and the presentation, Matt. It was really interesting. I think it shows what an absolutely amazing job the climate change team's doing. Absolutely amazing. It's also really good to see that you'll be looking into adaptation soon, because that's very necessary. And also brilliant news that Climate Emergency UK ranked the action plan so highly. That's great news. I looked at at their website. I noticed that we scored poorly on diversity and inclusion. So I was just wondering if they gave us any feedback on that, and whether we have any plans, whether we've decided how we might be able to improve that score. And then I also noticed that scored us very highly on biodiversity. And I didn't really think there was much on biodiversity in the climate change action plan. And it actually says at the end of your report that the next iteration may or may not include biodiversity. So I think you're probably aware there isn't an awful lot on biodiversity, and you have plans to work on that. So just wondering if you agree with me that the current action plan isn't strong on biodiversity, whether you can explain why we were scored so highly, and what your plans are to address that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So take the two things separately. So I'll take the broad point around, have we had any feedback? No. So we're sort of trying to unpick that ourselves. I think there's sort of two separate things. So adaptation needs looking at and will be included in the next version of the action plan. Probably is a new action area, I think, is the way we'll handle that. You point around biodiversity, so without getting into too much detail, biodiversity is obviously extremely complicated, and it links to one of the points in the report about scope change. It might be that we need a separate action plan for biodiversity on its own, and one which is very congruent with the conversations we're having around farming and the rural economy. And it's referenced in the paper, and I think it's fine to sort of talk about. We're engaging in a piece of work around policy and the rural economy, with some support again from Newcastle University, to kind of work with tenant farmers and other landowners to kind of understand the broader impact of some of the kind of recent policy changes on farming, which then naturally will take us into the conversation around the climate change aspect of that, and will then naturally take you into a biodiversity conversation when you get into the public money for public goods conversation and ELMS. So I'm expecting one of the recommendations coming out of that might be a specific set of actions around biodiversity, which would probably kind of run alongside climate change, clearly connected, but probably warrants its own focus, and would require a close connection with again colleagues in planning and the kind of ecologists within that team.
You all right? Anything else, Nick?
Thank you. Well, I'd like to say that I agree that a separate biodiversity action plan is warranted, and I think it would be a fantastic thing and a great step forward. Did you have anything to say about the score they gave us on equality and diversity?
So they use the word diversity and then diversity in a different way. So we think diversity and inclusion, which they did score as highly on from memory, rather than biodiversity, which they didn't score as highly on.
So yeah, just to clarify, biodiversity we were scored highly on for diversity and inclusion we were scored 1 out of 4. That was our worst score.
Yeah, so that was a bit confusing to us, if I'm honest, because I agree we're not particularly strong on biodiversity, but in terms of diversity and inclusion and the breadth of engagement that we've had, we think that's quite good. So that was a little puzzling to us, but it could be about how we quite frankly kind of wrote that bit of the response. It could be something as simple as that. I hope they're going to run the process annually, which then gives us a chance to make sure that what we put into that section next time is kind of up to date. But I think through the community engagement things that we've talked about, I would hope the kind of the inclusion and diversity of that inclusion, especially some of the work around heating and powering homes, which is very connected into targeting homes who are subject to kind of high levels of fuel poverty, would kind of support improvements in that area. So I am a little puzzled, if I'm honest, but I think we've got a number of steps in place which would allow us to kind of look at that. And equally puzzled, for the record, why we would have scored highly on biodiversity, other than if they'd wrapped in the whole conversation about land usage, which obviously then, given the rurality of our county, when compared to a city, we have high biodiversity. So maybe it's our baseline, I guess.
Okay. Right, well, if everyone else is finished, then I'll start, which is probably not what you want to hear. But anyway, the first thing, for me, it's all just about the words in the report rather than the very excellent work that you do. In two places, you've got BEIS in capital letters, and that must stand for something, but I would like you to tell us what that is. There seems to be a great reliance on trees that are mentioned all the time. And I'm not sure whether planting trees is the best way of carbon capture and all the things that, we're trying. Why do we think planting trees? Why are we planting trees? Why are we majoring on that when actually, creating peat bogs is a far better way of capturing carbon. And as far as the tree planting scheme we've got, I think at some point, and I realise this isn't you, but I think at some point we should be pointing out that they're not really trees we're planting, they're little whips, which are going to be a long, long time before one would class them as a tree. So, and again, I'm not, it's not a criticism of you or what we're doing. It's just, it's about the words for me. Everybody can plant a tree. And so far, according to the executive summary, it's 18,000 we've done so far. But the leader said that it was, you know, every household in the county was going to be allocated. Well, you know, we're a long way short then. You know, we're 120 odd, 130 odd thousand more to go. And I think that if I wasn't involved in this, and somebody said, you know, the council's going to give you a tree to plant, I would expect a tree. I wouldn't expect a little whip. So, yeah, Richard, I know that, but what I'm saying is it's perception, isn't it? That's all I'm saying. It's like, yeah, well, an acorn is a seed, so yeah, we'll give everybody an oak tree. You know, it's pre-packed in a flipping acorn, you know. So all I'm saying is, it's just, for me, this is about the words we use. You know, and this is vitally important. This is an existential threat. And we just need to be, you know, I think we need to be straight and honest with people. And the way you've got you know, you see we've got climate change representation in 44 wards. I think that might be better divided into places rather than, you know, people identify with Blythe. They don't necessarily identify with Plessy or Wensleydale or Croughton. You know, they belong Blythe. So it would be interesting to know, rather than it using wards, using places might be better. And again, with there are 27 divisions with car charging points in. It would be nice to know how that works geographically and what do we have to do to get everywhere covered. And I think on occasions when these car charging points have come to planning, you know, everybody says, well, actually, it's better there. But the reason that was chosen was because that's where they can get the power to them. You know, put them over there, which would appear to be, you know, geographically better, means digging the road up and putting an electric cable in it and all the rest of this stuff. Whereas if you put them there, it's easier to connect to the grid. So, you know, there's all sorts of. But at some point we might just decide, well, we don't care whether it's going to cost another £10,000 to get the thing across. That's, you know, that's the thing to do. And I think what we need to do with our mindset in all of these things is, rather than what's the cheapest thing to do or what's the most convenient thing to do, we should always do the right thing. You know, if that's where it's going to be more effective, but it costs us more money to get it there, then we've really just got to spend the money and put it in the place that's more effective. But then you start getting into the nitty gritty of, yeah, how much energy is it taking to get the cable from there to there? So, you know, this is just so complicated that, you know, if you start, you would never do anything, because it's just, you start getting confused in your own mind about how much energy is it taking to put that windmill up there, and, you know, not just how much did it cost energy wise to make it, but transport it and put the concrete grid in it and putting the concrete foundation in it. How much did that use, and how is that damaging the area around it? And, you know, it just goes on and on and on and on and on, doesn't it? Anyway, so the thing about heating, district heating schemes, I have seen on the television a couple of times where these things go terribly wrong and there is no resilience. And, you know, if the thing that's used to generate the heat and the electricity becomes expensive, then everybody just gets a big bill and you can't get out of it. You're in that house. That's how the heat and power are delivered. you can't get it from anywhere else. So you're kind of over a barrel with that. So I would just want to be careful how we did that. And I think we should be using the planning system to, I think perhaps one of the recommendations should have been specifically about using the planning system to deliver some of this stuff. You know, if Richard wants to put solar panels on his, there should be a quick way of doing that. You know, somebody should just say, yeah, absolutely, that's a brilliant idea. You know, regardless of the place, well, you know, the sun will shine on it, and you know, it'll spoil the tourist view of the valley if they can see it shining off, if you can see the sun reflected off his solar panels. Well, tough, you know. He should be allowed to do it. Anyway, so I think that's probably really all I have to say, other than just to go back to collecting what people have said. Councillor Castle started by asking for some way of quickly getting answers to things. So I think we would like to find a way of, you know, that amongst councillors we can be given the email address, and so when somebody says, oh yeah, well, I've heard that those, you know, ground source heat pumps are terrible, and, you know, la-di-da-di-da, then we can email somebody and get the response, rather than just us kind of, you know, agreeing or not agreeing, but actually knowing would be really great. Recommendation 3, about the executive directors and the cabinet members being asked to complete a training course. I think that should be open to all members, and I think we should be, you know, encouraging all members to do it, even if it is 2 half days. I think that's something that we should, you know, be pushing. I think that's, and I think the diversity thing, the only thing I can think of is that really Northumberland isn't, population-wise, isn't a terribly diverse place. So it could be, you know, there was a friend of mine who ran a club, and there were the people, he applied for a grant, and people came and said how fantastic it was, and, you know, they were really wanting to help, but they were a bit sort of nonplussed why, you know, every person was a you know, British white person. And it was, well, because really that's what the population is. You know, they just, we are not particularly ethnically diverse. So that might be what that's about. If they're starting to look at, you know, if every person you asked, or every person who replied was, you know, white British person, then they are going to look at it and say, well, hold on, what, you know, this isn't very diverse. Well, that's not our fault, is it? So anyway, if you could take those things on board, I think everyone else happy that, yeah, everybody else seems happy. Yeah, Brian, yeah.
Can I just make one point? I welcome the report. You've done some fantastic work and something to be very proud of for the county. But you're sitting in a scrutiny meeting, and the whole idea of scrutiny is not to accept the notes that you're giving us. We need to have some reaching questions and some searching questions, and maybe raise our concerns. So up until now, well done. Thank you very much.
So if you could answer my searching questions, it would be really good.
Will do. So the Bays one, I've just, to get the name right, I've Googled that. Department for Bays, so Business, Energy and International Strategy is the kind of the full definition. So it's basically what is the Department for Business, and that's where the kind of the grants often come from when it's connected to those things. That's what BAY stands for. In terms of your point around trees, so trees are important and are a great sequester of carbon, and, you know, something which we'll continue to kind of look at, and will, as part of the work maintaining the forest and planting, then absolutely we'll continue to do that. But you're absolutely right. Peat makes trees look like sort of micro absorbers, if you will. So we're doing some work with the 2 national parks at the moment and the Peatland Trust to basically do a peat audit. The reason why there's no mention of peat in the action plan at the moment is because there's no data on peat. So we literally need to do that audit and go round the county, kind of understanding what the kind of the baseline position is, and then that will then lead into a whole bunch of regenerative peat based activity, and that will be really, really important for carbon sequestration, as you said. So I can completely agree with those things. The point you made about language and buy-in, I completely agree with. I'm really kind of open to the kind of the scrutiny and the challenge and the kind of the enhancements of this. And one of the things which we definitely won't be able to kind of get right without support from people like yourselves is what is the right language for communicating with residents. And even the kind of small changes around things like, is it literacy or awareness in terms of training is really important. Your point around, is it a sapling or is it a standard? Again, is kind of really important, and I kind of take on board those points. And I think the more of that kind of feedback we can get to kind of make sure we communicate in the right way, the more likely we are to get the buy-in that we that we need. District heating, couldn't agree more. So district heating is a key element of what will let us hit net zero if we do it successfully. If we aren't effective in district heating, then you end up with a high cost inoperable system, and there are good examples of that, and there are good examples of better models. So part of the mitigation for that is we're working closely with the North East LEP, who've got a lot of experience in good and less good district heating schemes. So we're going to be leaning on their expertise to make sure that we kind of create models that work for our residents, and that will sort of take us to one of the points I made at the start of the presentation around ownership. So there are examples where some of those models are kind of fully owned in the private sector and they become quite high cost. And then there are other examples which are kind of done more in partnership, and then there are other examples which are done more in-house. And it's where do we need to sit on that spectrum, and what's our kind of tolerance for risk? And that's something which we'll need to get a lot of kind of scrutiny and discussion on kind of going forward. So I agree it's an important area, but it's also, I agree, it's a difficult area to kind of get right. I would love, but I would defer to Sean. I kind of hope I am. I'd love to be able to adjust the report, I don't know if I can or not, to kind of change the statement around the carbon literacy to be all members. I would be really kind of happy to do that if that's allowed ahead of it going to kind of full to cabinet next week. And similarly, the point around a recommendation around a closer, tighter planning. We're kind of doing that, but we'll be happy to kind of formalise that in the document if that's something which we're able to do, because I think both are kind of excellent points will be really additive to the process. I think that's the things that you asked.
Are we happy? Sorry, Nick, go on.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Gallagher invited us to ask more searching questions, so I've got a question. I'm not sure how searching, but I'll try. It says in the report that old landfill sites might be used for solar farms. I'm just wondering if there might be better uses that you could put old landfill sites to, for example, biodiversity net gain land. In my opinion, I'd like to see a solar panel on every roof before there are any solar panels put on soil. So that's just something I'd love to hear your opinion on that. Also a suggestion, the solar carport, in my opinion, is a brilliant thing, because car parks are terrible for biodiversity and doing nothing for climate change either. So a solar carport on a car park is a great thing. And I like the idea that it's going to be a blueprint for sustainable car parks as well. But could we perhaps push it even further, and could we make it a haven for biodiversity as well as a solar carport? I haven't thought how, but, planters, pollinators for bees, and I'm sure you could go much further with a little bit of imagination.
So basically, Councillor Morford wants his cake and eat it. So, but if you like to come back on that, would be great.
I mean, yeah, on the appropriate south-facing roof, a solar panel on every roof before it goes on the ground. I agree with. We get into a difficult spot around trade-offs, though. So if we want to be secure in our power supply, we may need to make some difficult choices around things like solar farms. And I think we need to make them together, and that's where it links to your point around planning. So I think the answer is probably on a case-by-case basis rather than a kind of a blanket sort of answer. In terms of kind of solar on every roof, though, I do wonder then what role we could play as a local authority in kind of helping to facilitate some of that, because it is quite a complex supply chain in terms of for a resident to access, getting the trade, getting the facilities to do that, and it is also kind of expensive. Now, interesting for people on lower incomes, a lot of the grants are designed for exactly them. People on lower incomes to get solar, for example, so that's a good thing. But then there's a number of people who wouldn't meet those thresholds. So there's something for us to think about and take away in terms of what role we might play in helping to kind of facilitate that. And I know that some other councils, I think it's Suffolk, for example, who do a kind of a sort of a group community buying thing. So they'll let bids come in from the community and they'll kind of then work to the market on their behalf. They won't contract for them, but they'll effectively aggregate bids together so they can get a better cost price point and things. So I think there's things like that that we can definitely do. Yeah, biodiversity. I mean, biodiversity and car parks. I think it sort of talks to the point earlier about Blythe, for example, and trees. And there's probably an important conversation around how we make our urban environment as green as it can be, and that will be just sort of one example. And that's definitely something which we'll take away.
Right, two things have just occurred to me from that, and then we shall move on. Yeah, that's okay. And then we shall wrap it up. It was there's something in the back of my mind that I'm sure at some point somebody was ploughing up a peat bog to plant trees, and I think that was everybody. We all got a bit upset about that, and I would hope that we as a local authority could actually stop that ever happening again. I think it was stopped, but the point is, peat bogs do a better job than trees, so we shouldn't be, replacing one with the other. And back to words, it's just, I'm just worried about this Great Northumberland Forest. If it's dotted about the place, I would prefer that we came up with a better name for it, and we got more publicity for it. It's just a vagueness that I'm not kind of aware of the whole process. Are we planting saplings? Are we planting trees? Are we? I don't know whether you saw the David Attenborough thing where the kids were just kind of throwing seeds, because that's what would get, and 20 years later they've kind of grown in a random way that they would. So how are we creating the Northumberland Great Forest, or the Great Forest of Northumberland, or whatever we've called it? And I think if they're in clumps, we should be Sanderson Wood, for instance, or Dodd Grove, or something like that, would be rather than calling it the Great Northumberland Forest, because it's not really. And I take it they're going to be native trees. We're not planting stuff that shouldn't be there, or are we just saying we need the species in there that absorbs the most carbon? And I'm sorry for dragging this out, but you shouldn't ask questions, Nick.
Yeah, so I guess two responses to that, and then probably the second is an action. So absolutely right tree, right place, and there's been quite a lot of work done through some funding we got through with DEFRA around understanding the broad picture to make sure that we kind of don't, you know, for example, plant trees in peatland. And there was a very well publicised example from a different local authority where they got that wrong. So there's some assurance around that which we can give you, and there's been some detailed mapping work around that. I think the second thing is it will probably be worth getting a specific update on the forest. There's a programme manager now, Mark Childs, who leads on that area and can probably kind of do a better job than I can in terms of the detail that you're asking. Because again, back to kind of species and things, it's sort of it's a mixture of what's appropriate for that particular site. So, you know, if some of the planting is for commercial use, then it might not be a native, it might be something else. But if it's for more biodiversity, then of course it would be a natural species. So it's more complicated than sort of just some kind of broader assumptions. And Mark would be, you know, I'm happy to kind of come along with Mark to kind of have that conversation, because he's got that level of detail which would be important to understand, I think.
Can I just add to that very quickly, that the idea is to try and get as many people involved as we can with different sorts of tree planting, so you don't end up with 100 hectares of Sitka spruce, but you end up with clumps here and there that will encourage access and will be native varieties and will be appropriate. So that's very important, and I think it would be a really good idea to get Mark Child to come and talk to you if you were interested to talk about what this is all about. One of the problems with it is that we have to just make sure that we don't start even pretending to think about compulsory purchase, because that's not what this is about. So, well, because if you try to make a big forest, say in the middle of, Long Horsley area, say, there are going to be people that own the land there that don't want to have trees. And it's very important for the sake of our tenant farmers and for our farming community that we don't ever even think about trying to say we want to have a big clump here and we're going to buy the land from you. So this is very much a voluntary community-led initiative that will allow more access, more enjoyment for different parts of it. So it means some people can grow an orchard. Somebody else can grow, silver birch spinney and so on. But it will all be part, and it'll all be interconnected, not necessarily geographically, but in terms of what the intention is. Is that right? Is that right, Matt?
Yes, and that's, I guess, the edge of the complexity that we're kind of talking about, exactly.
Richard.
You know, like houses, we have 2,000 empty houses. Rather than build the new ones, why don't we fix up the old ones? It's very similar with some woodland. We have neglected woodland. I refer to Tranwell Woods. There's some woodland there that has been in the same conditions ever since I knew it. It's just rubbish. And we could probably afford a survey of where there are what I'd call neglected, abandoned or whatever woods that would probably benefit by being felled and cleared out and replanted with some decent stuff that's going to do 2 or 3 different things. One, either be fuel for the future or use in the building industry or commercial woodland and or amenity, because some of these woods are really in a bad condition. I don't know who they belong to, but some of them really need assistance, and I think we would be guided to look into that, because we might find the answer to some of the questions that we're discussing today. Thanks.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, so on the woodland management reference in the paper is exactly to do that for the woodland that we are kind of in control and responsible for, and the idea being that would create a blueprint, hopefully, which we could then, exactly as you say, Richard, sort of extend. And that example of the kind of circular economy that you just described is probably one of the best examples of effectively where green jobs connects into climate change, because that whole piece of clearing the wood and then using the wood and then pushing that back in to kind of how we live and work is exactly the kind of thing that we want to do. So I think if we can prove a model for council-owned wood and then communicate that and celebrate that, that might be something which then other wood owners could access and utilise.
Okay, before I bring Nick in, I'm not suggesting we should plant a forest leader. what I'm saying is, what we've got, we should change its name. I don't think we should have swathes of, that needs to be exactly as you've described it, rather than, you know, 1,000 acres of whatever. Anyway.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, Matt. So the woodland management team are going to be managing the county council's own woodland, and am I right in thinking that they are going to be looking not only at managing them for people and wildlife, but also possibly for commercial timber?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, yes, Brian, sorry.
Just one further point out, you know, I welcome the second half of this. I think it's been real good conversation and scrutiny and challenging questions. We're talking about, and I tried to label Northumberland in two ways, as the rural and the urban. And we're kind of having most of our conversation about the rural. There are some massive issues within the urban areas around this. We're sticking on with the climate change project at the minute. The reality is, you mentioned something about grants and availability of funds to do improvements to properties, and that there's a bridging level there. And I think that should be a moving level on salaries, and I'm not quite sure if that is the correct way. I know that my son tried to get a grant, but he was making a little bit too much more money, so he was just over that bridge or over that level. I think it should be open to everybody, irrespective of what scale of wage you're on, but obviously deal into the scale of salary that they've got coming in. And there shouldn't be a no at all. Because I think on new builds, well, I'll turn it another way. If you're looking at a new car and you're going to get 60 mile a gallon compared to 30 mile a gallon, you're looking for more energy saving. Now, energy is going to be at the high budgeted price for the next 10, 15 years. So the reality is, if we can build that in with new builds, that's a win. But it's also, we're trying to help people that live in houses now, because people are living in houses in the towns that are 100 years plus old, and they need our help.
Yep. Okay.
Come back on that?
Yeah, of course you can.
So just to clarify, so would the idea be, which I'm interested in, is almost like a match funding? So if you're kind of above a threshold, we could say, right, we can pay 99% of the cost, and you're kind of scaling up would be a way to, because we do have a level of flexibility to design the schemes. We need to get approval from Bays as to how we design it, but that's something is interesting. We could definitely kind of look at. The point around new builds is important, and I can talk about this for charging, but I don't know the point for generation. So every new build now has to have an EV charger as part of the deal, the planning permission. That's like a national policy change. So that means every new build house will have its own charging point, which is obviously good. I'm not sure about the generation side of that, but we can look at that.
Yeah, it was coming back to Nick's point about every new build should have a solar panel on. Now, as I look at it now, you can get the tiles that are already got the solar panels built in them, so it looks like a normal roof. So the reality is that would people or residents pay a little bit more to have cheaper energy bills in the future? So that's a conversation to have.
Okay, excellent. Well, Sean, we asked for your expertise on whether we could amend the recommendations, or do we put it on a separate piece of paper and I go?
That's right. Separate piece of paper. So the report has already been... Do I have to start again? So the report has already been circulated to Cabinet. So what will happen is that I will provide a separate piece of paper with those bullet points that reflect the changes in the recommendations, or the suggested changes, so that we hope the Cabinet to actually agree on.
Okay, so we understand the two things, and if we're going to do that, could we have something about what Councillor Castle said about getting replies to things as well on there?
Yes, and woodland.
Yeah, and can I suggest then, having, as Brian says, the second half of this has been interesting as well. We're doing the woodland, we're doing the tree policy at some point, aren't we?
We are. We've been in touch with Greg Gavin to renew the next strategy, but I don't think it's due for renewal until 2023. Just off the top of my head. So if
But next year?
well,
I think it's out of date as far as I remember. Anyway,
but the point is we've got another offer, haven't we, for Mark Charles to come to a
yeah. What I was saying is, sorry, this is turning a conversation between Sean and I apologise. But should we roll those two things together? Should the Great Northumberland Forest, or the Forest of Great Northumberland, or whatever they've decided to call it, should that be related to the tree policy at all, or do we think they're two separate things and we should do them separately?
Could I just make a suggestion that I think it would be a very helpful thing if you could look at the Great Northumberland Forest, invite Mark Child, invite Matt as a separate item, because it is an important initiative we're taking, and maybe at the same time do a quick update of where we are with climate change work, the action plan 6 months on, say, something like that.
So are we content, Nick?
Yeah, I'd like to treat them separately. I want to really get stuck in
It's absolutely
to
fine
the
then.
Great North Forest.
Yeah, fine.
And I think the woodland and tree strategy, we need time to concentrate on big things like ash dieback.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So we're doing them separately. Then that's fine. And we'll have the Great Northumberland Forest just as soon as we can, if that's all right with everyone. Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Are we happy with that? Lovely. Excellent. Of course you can.
I've been informed by my team on my phone that it's climate@northumberland.gov.uk, not climate change.
You see, this is the problem. You see, this is the trouble.
Is that to get replies to questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, could I ask?
We'll circulate that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, could we circulate it to all members with people are increasingly being asked questions. We do have a plan. If you get asked questions that you want a proper answer to, rather than kind of, your own view, then email here and you'll get a proper response. Yes? Happy with that? Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Leader and Matt. That was very, very good. So we're now on item 7. Sean, do you want to speak to this for a couple of seconds? Or?
Just very briefly, Chair. Obviously, the next meeting is the last meeting, so we'll be closing the work programme for this year. So at the next meeting, I'll be grateful if members can think about the sorts of issues they want on next year's programme. Perhaps things that we haven't considered this year.
Okay, Brian?
Chair, can I just come on the 6th of April's meeting?
Yeah.
I've got a little bit of concern around that, the bus service improvement plan and concessionary travel. And that my concern is, I may be 100 mile wrong, but there was supposed to be a decision on the 31st of March about what allocations we get from national government. Now, as far as I'm aware, that's going to be pushed back a wee bit. And as we know, it can be pushed back a little bit further. So are we having this, are we putting the cart before the horse, basically? So at least if you know what budgets and what you're working with, at least you can make these plans and it can have a little bit of longevity into the year.
Yeah, two things on that, Chair. I'd forgotten it was an old version of the work programme that had been circulated. It has been agreed that those two reports should be dealt with post-scrutiny, so that the committee can actually look at the implementation of the proposals. So they'll be coming to you in May. But the second point is that period had actually been extended. It's not the 1st of March anymore. I think it's a bit later.
Well, it was the 31st of March, and I know it's been put back to April.
Yeah.
And same again, I just think it's good practice if we'll know exactly what budgets and what you work with. And I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
but I'm also mindful that, you know, that's a meeting that we could maybe slip something else in.
Yes, yes. At the back of my mind, I was thinking about the woodland update. The difficulty is it's going to be very difficult to get a report ready for the 6th of April. If I can get a presentation from Matt, I'll try, but it may just be too short notice.
That would be good if you could, I think. Yeah, because it's
That
strike
was
while
my-
the iron's hot, while we're all thinking about
That
it.
was my thought. It's just
Yeah,
a
yeah.
case to turn around. It would not be a report with a short notice, it would be a presentation.
Yeah, and then we'll speak to that and ask questions with amounts to the same thing. Nick?
Thank you. So just to check, bus service improvement plan is deferred, not happening on the 6th of April. And is the other one concessionary travel reimbursement? Is that the other one that's being deferred?
It's been agreed, I think universally accepted by this committee, that the preference is for post-scrutiny rather than pre-scrutiny, to look at the implementation rather than the proposal itself. So that is the way we're going to deal with those reports. But I think so that gap is going to be filled by the Potland Burn report.
Yeah, will there be time to bring that to the 6th of
I
April?
mentioned that at the beginning, but yes, because that's going to be considered by Cabinet next week. So hopefully by the time we get to the 6th of April, I'll have the draft minute from Cabinet so that you can discuss with the officer. And the officer has agreed that he can come and do that.
Right, thanks. Thank you.
Okay, I can see everybody's starting to pack the things up. It's not like us, is it, to drone on. So if we're happy with that, excellent. And then urgent business, I haven't been notified of any. Thank you all for your attendance. Hope you found that as useful as I did. And I look forward to seeing you at the next one, which, as we hear, is beginning of April. Good night.